All right. Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. Bright and early this morning, we're going live. Uh, and I have to admit, I just finished listening to a podcast, The Three Knockdown Rule. Shout out to Mario Lopez and Steve Kim. As I said before, I don't always agree with Steve Kim, but I do respect him. I think his opinions are worth a listening to, even though I don't always agree with them. I think he has an interesting take on certain things. I know he gets criticized of having an agenda and being pro top rank and anti PBC, but I think he's shown in recent years, or recently, I should say, that he can be objective. So shout out to the Three Knockdown Rule podcast. Well, they had Bob Arum on, and I just have to say, Bob Arum said some very interesting things that it had me thinking. And obviously, promoters have an agenda. Promoters exaggerate things. They say things to benefit themselves, their fighters, and their promotional companies. No one really can question that. But sometimes when you listen to them, there's always, or not always, but more often than not, there's always a little bit of truth in what they say. So you have to sometimes decipher what they say. You have to kind of pick through and extrapolate what they say and try to analyze and really listen and see if you could find some information that possibly would be true. And I have to say that in this interview, I think Bob Arum was telling the truth. I actually do believe him because the empirical data and the circumstantial evidence, in my opinion, backs up what he says. And one thing that really is standing out to me, and it's really starting to show me the truth, is I've made a statement before about these PBC fighters. And again, B, why you taking a side? You're supposed to be objective. I thought you were objective, blah, 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 blah. But again, my opinion and my stance on things is going to evolve as I get more and more information about a specific situation or topic. And I've said before, I'm seeing a pattern, and I'm not saying it's just with PBC, but it's primarily and mostly with PBC fighters, that every time a big fight is out there to be made with someone who is not a PBC fighter, and even fights that are within the PBC ranks, these big fights tend to not get made. And a lot of times the fighter will always come out with some crazy excuse and always blame the other side. It's never their fault. It's never that they just don't want the fight at this particular time, or they'd rather take an easier, obviously they're not going to say I want an easier fight for more money, but they go out of their way to really blame the other side and make up outlandish reasons why the fights don't happen. And I have to just look at this situation between Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua and how easy this fight is being put together right now. Like, this fight is almost pretty much done and set for either May or June. And the only thing that they really have to nail down, it seems, is the venue. So why is this fight so easy to make? And why was Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua so hard and so laborious and so cumbersome? And why was the process so dragged out? And why was it such a every little thing? And there's always an excuse being thrown out there. And I owe Eddie Hearn and I owe Anthony Joshua an apology, because recently Deontay Wilder did come out and say, I had more money on the table to fight Anthony Joshua, but I took the Fury fight. So he admitted that he had more money on the table to fight Anthony Joshua. He's always would say, one face, one name, one champion, but he never really gave us evidence that he believed that, because he never fought Vladimir Klitschko, and both Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury did. So they cemented their legacies. I mean, you could say whatever you want. Oh, well, he was older when they fought him, blah, 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 blah. But they still fought him, and when Tyson Fury fought Vladimir Klitschko, he was a 4-1 underdog, and he won the fight. Joshua was a favorite against Klitschko, but it was a close fight up until the time Klitschko got knocked out. And you can argue that Klitschko was even winning that fight. Some people say, I don't think he was, but a lot of people say he was. So Klitschko still gave Joshua all he could handle. He was still a threat in both fights. No, I don't care what anyone says, whatever, whether he was old or not, he was still a threat to both fighters. Both fighters had a chance of losing the fight, at least on paper. Going into the fight, no one thought that Fury was going to beat Klitschko. So again, the proof is in the pudding. Both of these guys fought Klitschko. Deontay Wilder never did. So we have to look at the empirical data. Both these guys wanted the challenge. They wanted to unify the titles. I mean, there was 3 titles on the line, or I think 4 titles if you want to count the IBO when Fury fought Klitschko, and there was 4 titles on the line when Joshua fought Klitschko. So that gives me evidence that both of these guys wanted to be the man in the heavyweight division. They wanted to unify the titles, whereas Deontay Wilder, as soon as he won that WBC belt, he held it hostage. He never really fought mandatories, and he fought a lot of easier fights. And if you look at all 3 fighters, Joshua, Fury, and Wilder, I'm going to have to say that Wilder has the weakest resume of all 3. He's got the weakest resume of all 3, and there's a reason behind that. And it's him. The only reason why, in my opinion, he fought Fury is because he said it himself. Fury is feather-fisted. He's pillow-fisted. He can't punch. Okay? First time he fought him, he thought it was a cherry pick. Fought him off a long layoff, and I thought Fury won the fight, just as probably 85 to 90% of the people who watched that fight think Fury won that fight. And if you didn't, you were probably a diehard Wilder fan. And that's just the truth. And whether people want to admit it or not, that's fine. They can say whatever they want. But at the end of the day, the proof is in the pudding. We look at empirical data. We look at the circumstantial evidence, and it doesn't lie to us. It doesn't lie to us. Deontay Wilder has never made any effort in his career to unify this heavyweight title. Never. Never. And there was always big money fights out there that people wanted to see. Everyone wanted to see him fight Klitschko, but they kept coming up with some type of excuse why he couldn't fight Klitschko. It's always the other guy's fault. But again, how is it so easy for Joshua to fight Klitschko, and how is it so easy for Fury to fight Klitschko? There was no problems in making the fight. There was no problems in making that fight with Klitschko. And there seems to be no problem with Fury and Joshua getting done. So again, you have to look at this one guy, Deontay Wilder, and you have to look at guys like Arum, Spence, who don't want to fight Terence Crawford. And we're going to get into that one later. So the history doesn't lie to us. The proof does not lie to us. It's there. It's right in our face. Everyone else is making the big fights. When you have guys like Joshua willing to step up, you have guys like Fury willing to step up. Dillian White's ready to put himself out there and fight tough guys. He fought a guy that you never fought either in Alexander Povetkin. And Alexander Povetkin, you can argue he's old, he's this, he's that, but he's still, in my opinion, a top 5 or 6 heavyweight in the world because he's dangerous, right? And we could say, oh, well, he popped positive for PEDs. That's why you didn't fight him. So but once he was cleared, there was never a rematch. Like there was not a rematch, excuse me. You never tried to fight him again. Whereas here's the hypocrisy. You went and fought Luis Ortiz. He failed to PED test himself, but you still fought him. So he was worthy of, okay, getting a second chance, but Povetkin wasn't. Because the reason why you didn't fight Povetkin is because Povetkin was more dangerous than Ortiz. So again, there's always been a way for Deontay Wilder to navigate his way through the tough fights. He never really took a tough fight, and the Fury fight, in his mind, was never a tough fight because he thought that Fury couldn't punch and Fury couldn't hurt him. And he thought that Fury wouldn't be able to take his power. So that's why he fought Fury. He fought Ortiz because he knew Ortiz was a little slower. He was older. He had stamina issues. He felt as though he could wear Ortiz down in the late rounds. Povetkin, he was always wary of fighting him, in my opinion, because Povetkin never had stamina problems. Dangerous from the opening bell to the last bell. So they never tried to make that fight later. They never tried to make a Dillian White fight. Okay? So, in my opinion, this was Deontay Wilder's plan. I don't think it was PBC's plan. I don't think it was Al Heyman's plan, because Bob Arum said something very interesting during that 3 knockdown rule interview. He said he's talked to Al Heyman. Okay? And Al Heyman had no reservations about having Spence fight Crawford. None. And Bob Arum said Spence is the one that doesn't want to fight. Spence is the one that doesn't want to fight. And there's never been any PBC PR people that come out and call Bob Arum a liar. So if Bob Arum is able to sit there and have conversations with Al Heyman, and it seems like the working relationship has greatly improved over time, and it seems like Al Heyman is willing to talk about a Spence-Crawford fight, and he's willing to say that the fight is definitely doable, but Spence is the one who keeps coming out and saying he doesn't want the fight. And I'm not going to sit there and insult fighters. I'm not going to call them cowards. I'm not going to say they're afraid, whatever. But let's be honest. Fighters want to take the easiest fights to make the most money. And, you could sit there and say, okay, well, that's great, whatever. That's fine. That's the business of boxing, and we have to accept that. But let's not lie about it. Let's not pretend and try to be manipulated by these fighters when they try to convince us that they really want the fights when they don't. And it's the other guy's fault why the fights aren't happening. And then they try to talk about numbers. They try to diminish the other guy. Terence Crawford is arguably the best or the second best. It's 1 and 2. It's either Crawford, Spence, or it's Spence Crawford. So we know that. And I think Spence is trying to hold out for a Manny Pacquiao fight. But who knows if that fight's ever going to happen? We don't know if that fight's going to happen. We don't know what Manny Pacquiao is going to do next. We don't even know if Manny Pacquiao would fight Spence. We don't know. Because Manny Pacquiao can fight anyone, and it's going to be a big money fight. So Pacquiao doesn't need Spence. Spence needs Pacquiao in his mind, I believe, if he's trying to make the biggest money fight for him in the division. I think Spence versus Pacquiao would probably be the biggest money fight in that welterweight division, in my opinion. Second biggest money fight would be Spence Crawford. So Spence is going to hold out as long as he can in the hopes of making that Manny Pacquiao fight, just like all the welterweights did when Mayweather was fighting. Keith Thurman, he was holding out, hoping he could get a Mayweather fight, and he was avoiding challenges and not fighting guys that we wanted to see him fight, because everyone at that time was holding out, hoping to win the Mayweather sweepstakes. Well, Spence is holding out, hoping to win the Manny Pacquiao sweepstakes right now. So he's going to push off that fight with Crawford, because I think there is some concern and some doubt in his mind that he possibly may lose that fight. I don't think he's 100% sure that he could beat Crawford. I think he feels more confident that he could beat Manny Pacquiao at this stage of Manny Pacquiao's career, because Manny Pacquiao is older. So that's the situation at hand right now. I think that's where we're at. So this whole thing about guys not being able to work with the other side of the street, we're always blaming the promoters. We're always blaming the networks. We're always blaming everything else. But let's take a look at some of these PBC fighters and ask ourselves, why are these guys the only ones that don't want to do business and fight other guys from other promotions. And you can't blame Al Heyman for everything. Okay, you can't keep blaming Al Heyman. You can't keep blaming PBC. You can't blame Fox. You can't blame Showtime. These fighters have to accept part of the blame here for these fights not happening. Just look at history. The two biggest fights in boxing right now that could ever be made, in my opinion, or could have been made before Wilder lost his heavyweight title, was Wilder versus Joshua and Spence versus Crawford. And it's so ironic that both of those fights did not get made. And both of those fighters were PBC fighters. It's the same thing with Sean Porter. Sean Porter talked about fighting Terence Crawford. Okay. And now, did they offer him less money, allegedly? Possibly. Whatever the case may be. But again, who is Porter going to fight right now? Because Spence ain't going to fight him next. Okay. Spence ain't going to fight him next. So Spence has the IBF and the WBC titles. So who's Crawford going to fight? Is he going to fight Jamal James for the WBA title? Is he going to make more money fighting Jamal James than he would fighting Terence Crawford? I don't know. So Porter allegedly turned down the fight with Crawford because again, he said that the money was too low. Okay, so did you try to negotiate? Are you trying to negotiate? Do you really want the fight? Are you going to work to try to make that fight with Crawford? Because here's the thing. What is there for Porter right now? Again, Spence ain't going to rematch Porter anytime soon. I just don't think that's going to happen. Now all of a sudden Keith Thurman wants to fight Spence, but when he had the title, he didn't want it because he was waiting for the Manny Pacquiao sweepstakes, and then when he got the Manny Pacquiao sweepstakes, he lost. He lost the Manny Pacquiao sweepstakes. So again, this is a pattern, guys. These guys are fighting strictly for money, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But on these PBC fighters' bucket list, in my opinion, legacy is at the very bottom. It's at the very bottom. Fury has made enough money. Joshua has made enough money, in their opinion, and this is just my opinion saying this. They already have made enough money where they know they're going to be set for the rest of their lives. So now they're working on legacy. Legacy means something to both fighters, in my opinion. You can say what you want about Joshua. You can say what you want about Fury. These guys really care about how they're going to be remembered when they leave the sport. I'm not so sure a lot of these PBC guys are really thinking about their legacy. Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, Tommy Hearns. They said to themselves, you know what? I'm always going to be able to make a lot of money out there. We could sit there and fight each other till the cows come home. We're going to be making money. All these fights are big money fights. That's what they were saying to themselves. But we've seen time and time again, these PB, same thing. Jamal Charlo never fought Golovkin, never fought Canelo. Turned down the Canelo fight. Caleb Plant turned down the Canelo fight. So it's always these PBC fighters coming up with excuses on why these fights can't be made. But everyone else seems to be like, Amir Khan never had any problems fighting Canelo. Kell Brook never had any problems fighting Golovkin. Kell Brook had no problems fighting Crawford. So all these other guys are willing to take the big step, but these PBC fighters are the ones who aren't taking the big steps now. They're not taking the big fights, and they're always blaming the other side. But again, you have to look at the empirical data. You have to look at the pattern here. Charlo, Spence, Porter, Wilder, they're all turning down the biggest fights that they could fight in the division. The fights that everyone wants to see. Mayweather and Pacquiao, that fight took almost 6 years to make. That's the, it's a pattern. It took Pacquiao to lose to Marquez, lose to Bradley before that fight got made. Okay? That's what it took. You could argue that the whole drug test situation, but Pacquiao agreed to the drug test situation, and the fight was still put off for a long period of time. I'm not saying Pacquiao doesn't deserve some of the blame, but as time went on, Pacquiao seemed to me to be more enthusiastic on making that fight, more so than Mayweather. So it is a pattern with these PBC fighters, and it's not Al Heyman's fault. Because if Bob Arum is able to have open conversations with Al Heyman, and he's telling you that Al Heyman has no problem making these fights, it's up to the fighters to want to make these fights. And the evidence is showing us that these PBC fighters are not willing to take the big fights. They're not willing to take the tough fights. From what I was told, and again, this is just what I've heard and what I think even fighters have said this. Al Heyman will put a list of fighters in front of a fighter. They'll say, okay, we have 3 fighters that you could fight. Choose one. And the PBC fighter chooses the fighter he wants to fight. And more often than not, it seems to me that a lot of these PBC fighters are taking the easiest fight for themselves. And I get it. But stop putting the bullshit narrative out there like Wilder, one face, one name, one champion, because you never wanted that. You never made any effort to unify this division, whereas Joshua and Fury did. Joshua and Fury did. And then you could say, well, Fury had his problems, and he had to step away for a while and this and that. Okay. So when he stepped away for a while, his titles were vacated and Joshua picked them all up. Fury never held the belt hostage like Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder held that WBC title hostage for years. For years. Never had to fight mandatories. Never really fought tough fights. You could say the Luis Ortiz fight was his toughest fight. It was his most dangerous fight, whatever. But again, Luis Ortiz, stamina issues. The guy was taking blood pressure medicine because he had health issues. The guy popped positive for PEDs twice, but he gets a second chance. But Povetkin doesn't get a second chance. And the reason why I repeat that Povetkin never got that second chance at redemption like Ortiz did. That was the big thing. Well, everyone deserves a second chance, Wilder said. Then why didn't Povetkin ever get that second chance? We already saw what Povetkin did to White. You don't think that could have happened to Wilder? Does everyone really think that Wilder would have had an easy time with Povetkin? Look what Povetkin did to Joshua. Like, he rocked Joshua. I had Povetkin winning that fight until Joshua stopped him. Okay? Until Joshua stopped him. On any given night, you could say whatever you want about Povetkin, how he's old, he's this, he's that. He is a danger to anyone on any given night if he hits you with that uppercut. If he hits you with that uppercut or that left hook, he has the ability. He has the ability to knock anyone out on any given night. He gave Joshua all he could handle, and we just saw what he did to Dillian White. And Dillian White is ready to jump right back in there with them again. And Wilder never even fought him once. Wilder never even fought Joseph Parker when Joseph Parker had the WBO title. Never. He wouldn't even fight Joseph Parker. He never made any attempts. So Joshua fights Joseph Parker, but Wilder never did. And there's always a reason. It's always the other guy's fault. This is a pattern with these PBC fighters. Thank you so much, Donkey Boxing. There's always a pattern with these PBC fighters. And we cannot ignore this. We have to look at the facts here. Now, we got Fury versus Joshua happening. Biggest fight in the sport of boxing. And the negotiations have been seamless. Why is that? Why is that? Because Fury and Joshua are not bullshit artists. When they say they want to fight for legacy, when they say that they want to unify these titles, it's not smoke and mirrors. It's not bullshit. And, after all of this whole debacle about the Glovegate and all these excuses Wilder has come out with, and now he admitted that he had more money on the table to fight Joshua than he did to fight Fury, and all this recent behavior from Wilder just proves to me. And then there's rumors that I guess he's going to be firing Shelly Finkel. I don't know how true that is. It seems like his team is, he's getting rid of everybody and blaming everybody. Just, it's everyone else's fault why he lost. There's always an excuse why he lost, whatever. That's fine. But given all this recent behavior, I have a hard time believing anything Deontay Wilder says and taking, anything he says to heart. I have a hard time looking at anything he says and saying to myself, does it have credibility? I don't think Wilder has any credibility left in the sport of boxing. I just don't think he does with all of this, all the BS that he said. I have a hard time taking anything Deontay Wilder says seriously anymore. I have a hard time believing Deontay Wilder because, again, he creates this narrative in his own mind, or at least it seems as though he's creating this narrative in his own mind, and he puts out this narrative to the public that it's never him. It's always somebody else. It's always somebody else's fault. It's never his fault that when something bad happens, or when something doesn't get made, or a fight doesn't get made, or a loss, or anything negative that's going to happen in this guy's career, he's never going to take responsibility for it. He's never going to take ownership for it. It's always going to be someone else's fault. Now, when Fury stepped away from the sport of boxing, he never blamed anybody. He said this was, I was suffering from depression. This was something that I had to deal with. This was something that I had to fix. When Joshua lost to Ruiz, he never made excuses. Other people made excuses for him, but he never made one excuse. One excuse. So you could criticize both men. Fury, you could say whatever he wants. He's had his issues in the past. But again, both men have taken ownership of their career. Both men never blamed anyone. When Fury switched trainers, he never said one bad thing about Ben Davidson. He just said, I wanted to get Sugar Hill for this particular fight because I thought that the style that I want to utilize and the style that I want to put forth in the rematch with Wilder, I thought that Sugar Hill would be the better trainer for me at this time. Never threw anyone under the bus. He never, criticized anybody. Never took shots at anybody that was in his team that is no longer in his team. Never took shots at Freddie Roach. Never said anything negative about anybody in his team. He took responsibility for his actions, and Joshua did the same thing, but Wilder has not. Wilder cannot come to terms with this defeat. He cannot accept it. And, that shows to me to be a serious character flaw in Deontay Wilder's, psychological makeup. I think that he's got an issue accepting responsibility for anything that doesn't go his way, and he's going to always make an excuse for it, in my opinion. So I know we can't ignore the circumstantial evidence here. Charlo, Spence, Porter, Wilder, Plant, all PBC fighters who keep turning down big money fights. Keep turning down big money fights. All of them. All of them. Look at Canelo. Look who he's fighting everybody right now because he's fighting for legacy. These guys are happy. They said to themselves, I've made enough money right now where I'm going to be good the rest of my life. Lennox Lewis was better than Riddick Bowe. I think history has shown us that. At the time when that fight was being proposed, right after Riddick Bowe beat Evander Holyfield, I thought Riddick Bowe was better. But, I think Riddick Bowe, you can argue, is more talented all around than Lennox Lewis, but I think his character and his work ethic is totally different than Lennox Lewis. Like Lennox Lewis I think, was stronger mentally than Riddick Bowe, and I think he was just more disciplined, and he was able to get the most out of his ability. Where Riddick Bowe, in my opinion, never really got the most out of his ability. So that's just my opinion. So that's just my opinion there. I think in terms of talent, I would make an argument that Riddick Bowe had more all-around talent than Lennox Lewis, but Lennox Lewis, I think, was just a more disciplined guy. I think he had the stronger. I think he was more mentally tough. I think he was stronger mentally all around than Riddick Bowe. I mean, I think make an argument that Lennox Lewis punched harder than Riddick Bowe too. But I just think Riddick Bowe was just a really good, well-rounded pro. He could fight inside, outside. I think he was just a very talented guy. But like I said, I think he squandered a lot of his ability. So getting back to this topic, man, yeah, I just think Wilder never had any intentions of unifying this division. I think that was all smoke and mirrors, and I think history shows us that, because look at the other two heavyweights. Look at the other two heavyweights. Look what they've done, and then look what Wilder's done. There's always been an excuse. So, and you could say that that's a good point, Centurion Son. You could say that all these PBC fighters are trying to adopt the Mayweather playbook. You know, they saw how it worked for Mayweather, but once again, they're not Mayweather. They don't have the Mayweather numbers, and they never did what Mayweather did when Mayweather was Pretty Boy Floyd back in the 130-pound days, the 135-pound days, when he was fighting all those tough fights, when he was fighting fights that people thought that he would lose. He didn't have to fight Castillo in a rematch. He could have said, you know what? I won the fight. Why should I rematch the guy? I don't have to rematch. But he gave him a rematch. You know, when he fought Hernandez, when he fought Corrales, those were fights that people said to themselves, maybe he could lose these fights at the time. You know, he took on tough challenges, you know, early in his career. These guys have never did or are willing to do what Mayweather did when he first got started. They want the status, and they're not putting in the work like Mayweather did. And that just, we can't deny that. Look at Caleb Plant's resume. Look at some of these, like look at some of the resumes. Look at Charlo's resume, and then look at Canelo's resume. You know, look at Canelo. Look what Canelo has done, and then look what Charlo's done. Look what Plant's done. They're not taking the big fights. And when the big fights are presented to them, there's always an excuse why the big fights can't happen. They always have to blame the other side. But why is the other side making bigger fights with other fighters? But they just can't seem to make the big fights with the PBC fighters. Again, it's a pattern. And if people don't want to listen to the pattern, they don't want to acknowledge the pattern, then it's cognitive dissonance. You know, I've been guilty of it before. That the wool has been pulled over my eyes long enough, and I'm not going to fall for it anymore. I fell for it myself. I found myself defending Wilder. I found myself defending Spence. I found myself defending Charlo. I found myself defending other fighters on the PBC stable. Always trying to make an excuse and give them the benefit of the doubt, but I can't do it anymore. It's over. It's done. It's done. I can't allow myself to fall for the okie doke time and time again. I cannot allow myself to be lied to anymore. And I don't care who likes it or not. I'm going to get 1,000 dislikes because I know the whole LDBC is going to come out and they're going to dislike this video. And I know that. And yes, I am going to name drop. I am going to say, yeah, the LDBC is going to come out and they're going to all dislike this video. All of them. All of them. Because again, we all know what's going on over there, bro. We all know what's going on over there. These guys are using Deontay Wilder's name to make money. They're using Deontay Wilder's name. To this day, they're still making Glovegate videos because, again, they know that their sycophants will come in their chat, give them super chats, give them views, and they are using Deontay Wilder's name to make money. I am not. Because if I was going to use Deontay Wilder's name to make money, I would join the Glovegate Brigade. I would be part of that movement, and I could probably get all those guys coming over to me and giving me super chats and giving me views, but I will not sell myself out for money. I have other ways to make money. I have a job. I have other sources of income that I can make money off of without having to compromise myself. I am not going to pimp this channel out. I'm not going to pimp myself out just so I can make money and be followed by a bunch of delusional fucking fans. I'm just not going to allow myself to do that. I am not going to allow myself to do that. I have too much pride in myself. I have too much pride in my reputation. I am never going to compromise myself on this channel for money. I'm just not going to do it. So Wilder's using these guys. Wilder's using these guys for publicity. He's letting these guys be his mouthpiece. He's letting these guys help him out. And these guys are using him to make money. Wilder could give two shits about these guys, and these guys could really give two shits about Wilder. This is a business. This is all about serving each other. Both sides are trying to be trying to self-serve themselves, and that's what this is all about. That's what this is all about. Deep down inside, Wilder saw that video by that guy who made the Glovegate video, and then he said, "Wow, I got an idea here. I could use this. I could use this to my advantage. I could use this to my advantage." And what is he doing? He's using this to get publicity for himself. Look at all the articles. Look at all the videos. Even the mainstream media is now jumping on this. So this gets Wilder attention. This gets Wilder attention. If Wilder just went off into the sunset and said, I lost to the better man and stuff, I don't think that he would be getting all this attention or the same amount of attention as if he created controversy, because we do know that controversy sells. And Wilder has made a decision that I am going to compromise my own reputation. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to put myself out there. And that's what he did. When he first started, he was different. He was humble. He never really said the same things he said. But then he, started to change his image, started to become that hostile guy, that guy who just that angry fighter, that angry guy, the guy that the whole world was against. I got the whole world against me. He was trying to act like Tupac, basically. And that helped him out. But now he's taken it to another level. Now he's gone full heel. He's turned himself into a WWE character, basically, in my opinion. Yeah, so both sides, I think, are self-serving themselves. That's just my opinion. I think this is, this whole thing has turned into an embarrassment for the sport of boxing. And I think real boxing fans will always, when Joshua and Fury end up fighting in the early summer or late spring, everyone's going to know that that's a real fight. And then most people are going to say, this is what Wilder should have done. This is what Wilder should have done. Wilder did have a great story, Tony Robles, fighting for his daughter, starting with nothing and making himself something. He made a lot of money, and he had a successful boxing career. He's probably set for life right now. He's got beautiful children. He's got a nice partner that he's with right now. She seems like a good woman. He has a good story. He had a good story, but I think he's doing irreparable damage to his career right now. And at this point, he doesn't really care, because now he's basically sold himself out. He sold himself out that I'm going to be the the bad guy here. I'm going to be this figure. I'm going to be this polarizing figure. Basically turned himself into Donald Trump right now. Is what he did. People aren't going to want to accept that. But he's basically doing the same thing Donald Trump's doing. Oh, they stole this from me. I was robbed. We need to fight. We need to fight. We need to fight. And that's what Wilder's doing right now. That's what Wilder's doing right now. He's trying to make this about, oh, well, the system's against me. You know, he's trying to be this polarizing figure, you know, this sympathetic figure. He wants everyone to rally behind him against the system. The judges were against me. The referee was against me. My trainer was against me. The commentators were against me. Everyone, he's acting just like Donald Trump. It's always somebody else's fault. There's this conspiracy theory against me. And just like Donald Trump, he has these sycophants that support him, these minions that support him. And just like Donald Trump, who's being disgraced right now, is being embarrassed right now, the same thing is happening to Wilder, but Wilder doesn't care. Wilder doesn't care because he's still having his name being put out there. The way he looks at it is, you know, I'm still adding to my brand. I'm making myself popular. I'm making myself be put out there as I'm still the champion. I really didn't lose that fight. I was cheated. Just like Donald Trump is saying, I was cheated, even though he legitimately lost the election. Wilder is doing the same thing. And believe it or not, whether we want to believe it or not, or we want to accept it or not, it's actually working for him because he is gaining a following, and he's using YouTube and other social media outlets to fuel this movement. And it's working. It's working. But the powers that be in the sport of boxing are not going to allow him to gain any favorable treatment with it. I mean, no one's going to overturn the decision. So, you know, he's not going to be able to get a rematch now because he waited too long. He kept putting it off. And then once again, it's always the other side's fault. Well, they wanted a live crowd, so we couldn't make the fight. So you demand the fight. You say, you know what? I want to exercise my right to this rematch. You should have taken legal action months ago to force Fury to fight you, but you waited for the contract to expire before you did anything. You waited for the contract to expire before you did anything. You should have been on top of this. You should have been more proactive about this long ago. But you didn't. You weren't. You waited for, you saw this Pharaoh video and then you decided to run with it. You thought that you could use that for publicity, which you did, and it did get you more publicity. Because now even Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman, people on mainstream shows are talking about all your excuses. And you have to ask yourself, yeah, you're being talked about. You're getting a lot of attention. It's probably making you more popular. It's keeping you in the public eye. But is this the type of publicity that you want? So once again, just like Floyd Mayweather, how he was the bad guy. All these guys are trying to take the Mayweather blueprint and run with it, whether they want to admit it or not. So now Deontay Wilder is saying to himself, well, you know what? I could make more money as the bad guy. I can get more attention as the bad guy. Now I want to be that guy that people tune in to want to see me lose. And this is the guy, and this is the character that Deontay Wilder has turned himself into at the expense of compromising his legacy and his reputation. He's willing to tarnish his legacy and his reputation to gain popularity, to create this movement, just like Donald Trump did. and to some degree, just like Mayweather did, because Mayweather had that group of fans that no matter what he did, he could do no wrong. And a lot of fighters have it, but no matter what Mayweather did, his fans were always going to give him a pass on it, always. And you can make the same argument that the Pacquiao fans did the same thing, but again, there's this pattern with these PBC fighters that no matter what they do, no matter how many big fights they turn down, it's always the other guy's fault. It's always the other guy's fault. It's like that. It's like that guy that keeps going through relationships. Oh, I can't find the right woman. I can never have a relationship and make it last. Meanwhile, it's always the women's fault. It's not his fault. So all these girls keep dumping you, but there's nothing you're doing to make these girls dump you. There's nothing you're doing. It's like a guy who keeps who keeps going through jobs. Oh, I can't find the right job. It sucks out there. All these employers, they're against me. Well, maybe it's you. Deontay Wilder has no ability to self-reflect at all. He has no emotional intelligence to be able to look at himself and say, maybe I got to fix things within myself. Instead of saying, well, it's everyone around me that needs to be fixed, not me. I don't need to be fixed. Everyone else needs to be fixed. It's not me. It's not my fault. So there's no ability to self-reflect here. And you can make an argument that Bob Arum and Fury never wanted to fight Wilder the third time because they were looking at the AJ fight. You can make that argument. But why did Wilder allow that to happen? He had a contract in hand. He had contractual rights to have that third fight, and he did nothing to force that fight. He waited till the very end, till that contract expired, to make that fight. I'm going to go on a limb here. I'm going to say that Wilder never wanted that third fight with Fury, but he wanted to save face. He had to make it look like it was their fault why the third fight didn't happen. I don't think Wilder wanted that third fight. I think he wanted a couple easy fights to come back and get his confidence back and get back into the swing of things. I mean, he's coming off of another bicep tear injury. This guy's been suffering a lot of injuries recently in his career. Maybe he wanted to rebuild himself, but he didn't want to look like he was avoiding the third fight. So maybe he just waited for the contract to expire himself, and then maybe he wanted this whole situation to play out the way it did. Maybe he did. Because if you really wanted that third fight, then why weren't you being more proactive early on? Once again, these PBC fighters create a narrative where they can try and always blame the other side why the big fights don't happen. I don't think he just suffered a bad knockout loss. He had an injury. I believe he was injured before the fight, and I believe the injury was exacerbated during the fight, but it is what it is. Fury could have had injuries too, whatever. I think he intentionally allowed this contract to expire because he didn't feel as though he was ready to jump right back in with Fury after being knocked out like that. And he was embarrassed that he kept calling Fury pillow-fisted. This guy's pillow-fisted. He's feather-fisted. He can't punch. There's no way he can hurt me. Then he ends up getting knocked out by this guy. So what does he have to do? Oh, this feather-fisted guy couldn't knock me out. What happened? His gloves had to be loaded. So again, he created this false narrative to try to protect his image, to try to protect his ego. Whether he believes it or not, it's allowing him to get all these minions and these sycophants behind him. So that's the thing. That's what he's doing. That's what he did. So all this was basically to save face. I don't think he wanted the third fight. I really don't. Why would Fury not want the third fight? He just destroyed the guy. His confidence would be sky high. Obviously, the bigger fight would be with Joshua. That's fine. But that Joshua fight wasn't going to go anywhere. He could have still fought Wilder and beat him again, and then that fight would still have been on the table. It wouldn't have gotten any less viable. It wouldn't have lost any steam. It wouldn't have gotten smaller. It would only have gotten bigger. I think most people feel pretty confident in saying that Fury would have beat Wilder the third time, right? Think about it. The worst possible version of Fury, the worst possible version of Fury beat Wilder, the worst possible version. And then we saw what the best possible version of Fury did to Wilder. He knocked him out, beat him up, destroyed him. So are we to believe that all of a sudden that best version of Fury goes back down to the worst version of Fury? Either way, whether he's at his best or he's at his worst, he's shown that he can beat Wilder. Oh, what if Wilder lands that big right hand? He already landed it, and he got up, So all the evidence points to Fury just being able to beat Wilder probably 10 out of 10 times. Like I always said, it was so after that draw, Wilder should have jumped right into a rematch. Jumped right into a fight with AJ. AJ, I think Wilder has a better chance of beating AJ than he does Fury, because I think Fury is more durable. I think Fury's got a more difficult style. I think AJ's easier to hit. I think AJ has questionable stamina. I think his chin is questionable. He would have had a better chance of beating AJ, and he had that fight on the table. But he took the tougher fight with Fury for less money. Why? Because I think in the back of his mind, he said to himself, I could probably knock out AJ, but AJ may be able to knock me out. I don't think this guy Fury can ever knock me out. At worst, I could probably go the distance and maybe I'll get a decision. But, or I could probably knock this guy out. I was seconds away from knocking this guy out the last time. Maybe I can knock this guy out. But again, on paper, in my opinion, Fury was always the toughest fight. So he knew there was a chance in that probably Fury could beat me, but I don't think he could knock me out. I already landed that right hand. I was a millisecond away from getting the knockout against this guy in the 12th round. That's something he probably couldn't let go of, right? But he said to himself, yeah, the Joshua fight's more money. It's for all the belts, but this guy can punch. This guy is a harder puncher than Fury. This guy has a chance of knocking me out if he hits me clean. I don't think Fury does. So that's probably why, in my opinion, again, this is just my opinion, why he avoided the Joshua fight. Because maybe in his mind, he thought the Joshua fight was more dangerous than the Fury fight. I didn't see it that way. I thought, and I still do think. What's up, Lion Killer? How you doing? What's up, Blood? I think that in the back of his mind, he thought that the Fury fight was an easier fight, or was a less dangerous fight than the Joshua fight. But stylistically, I just think that Fury is a nightmare for him, more so than Joshua. But he probably may not have thought that. That's why he took the Fury fight. He thought Fury was less dangerous than Joshua because of the difference in punching power. That's what he thought, in my opinion. Could I be wrong? Sure. Do I think I'm wrong? No. That's the only reason why I could come up with him not fighting Joshua. Same thing with Klitschko. Klitschko had knockout power with the right hand, right? It's kind of ironic he never fought Klitschko either, right? Never fought Klitschko either. So guys, this is an objective video. I can't allow the wool to be pulled over my eyes anymore. I can't allow it. I can't allow it. You have been telling me, a lot of people have been telling me, and I have to admit that you guys were right. I have to admit you were right, Ralph. Even though you are biased, regardless of your bias, you were still right. So I can't disregard what you're saying just because I think you're biased. You could be biased and still be right about the situation. I mean, you were right about the situation. He never wanted to fight. He never did. You're right. You're right. You're right. If I look at this objectively, Wilder he never wanted to unify this division because there were two opportunities when he could have, and he never did. There was always a reason. There was always an excuse. Always an excuse. Now he's coming out talking shit about Breland again because Breland responded. You know, Breland responded, and he's like, "Oh, well, I can't believe that he would say those things about me." Are you serious? So you could say whatever you want about him, and he's just supposed to sit there and accept it and not reply back? Did you think he was just going to sit there and not reply back to you? Did you really think that was going to happen? That he was just going to sit there and allow you to say whatever you wanted, and he was never going to respond to that? Props to Breland. Props to Breland. You know, you could tell as time was going on that they minimized his role in there. Why would you listen to JD's over Mark Breland? There's one reason why you would do that. You want me to tell you why he listened to JD's over Mark Breland? You want to know why? Someone in the chat, see if you can answer this question before I answer it. Why do you think Wilder put more faith and stock into JD's than he did Mark Breland? And why did he listen to JD's more? Why did he put JD's in a more in a bigger role and gave him a more authoritative role in that corner than he did Mark Breland? Answer the question for me in the chat. Let me see if you guys can get it right. This is a quiz. This is a quiz from the Beeb to you guys. Why did he do that? Let me see if you guys can answer this question. Can anyone answer this question before I answer it? Does anyone know why he put more faith and stock into JD's than he did Mark Breland, even though Mark Breland is light years ahead of JD's in boxing knowledge? Why? Why? Can anyone answer that question? There you go. Because D's let him do whatever he wanted to. Because D's would tell him what he wanted to hear. Mark Breland would not. There you go. Exactly. There you go. You guys aren't stupid. You guys know. He was the yes man. So this is why JD's is not being held accountable for anything that went wrong that night. He went into that locker room. He inspected those gloves, but it wasn't his fault. It wasn't his fault. Okay? It wasn't his fault. It was Breland's fault. Like JD's, even though Wilder thinks that Fury's gloves were loaded, it wasn't JD's fault for not finding it. It was Breland's fault for spiking the water, even though Breland did not have a water bottle in his hand at any point in time the night of that fight or in the locker room. But, you know, and again, I'm going to say something very controversial. Okay? And it's not even my place to say it, but I'm going to put it out there. It's amazing to me that Wilder is talking so much about racial issues, right? He's talking so much about racial issues and putting out the pro-black narrative, and that's fine. He has every right to do that. It's not my, if he has every right to do that. If that's his stance, that's fine. And this is probably not even my place to say this, but he threw the black man under the bus before he threw the white man under the bus. And there was zero evidence against that black man, right? It's just like history. So many times this judicial system has went against the black man without even having any evidence, but black people are guilty just because of the color of their skin. So now he's putting that same narrative out there that Breland is guilty of something with no evidence. But JD's was actually in that locker room watching the hands getting taped. So if there was something wrong, as Wilder says there was, the white man missed it. So how is it not the white man's fault, but it's the black man's fault? So he went against the black man, and the black man had no evidence against him that he did something wrong. And the white man really did, because he was in we have video of seeing JD's in that corner, sitting right there, 2 feet away from the hands being wrapped. He could see everything. So if there was something wrong, why doesn't JD's come out and say, I was there, I respect Deontay Wilder, or whatever his opinion, whatever he has to say, but I was there, I saw the hands being wrapped, and I didn't find anything. So he threw the black man under the bus. This is another black man throwing a black man under the bus. And I know it's been mentioned before, but all of the LDBC people, that have always cried out racism, racism, racism. Well, guess what? Wilder threw another black man under the bus, and you guys are saying nothing about it. You frauds. You frauds. You frauds. The black man had zero evidence against him. Just like the cop that pulls the black man over and says, I want to search your car, and throws a little dime bag in there or a little 8-ball in the back seat. And then that guy gets arrested. The same thing's being done to Breland, and you frauds are doing nothing about it. Breland is that guy driving the car that gets pulled over, and then the cop says, I'm going to do a search. I can smell something. And then he throws the little Glock in the back seat, or he throws the friggin' 8-ball in the back seat and pulls it out and say, oh, this is possession. We got to get out of the car. Put your hands on the hood. We're locking you up for the night. And you guys said nothing about it. You fucking frauds. You fucking frauds. It's clear as day. It's clear as day. Wilder threw the black man under the bus. And this is not just an ordinary black man. This is a black man that was arguably the best amateur fighter in the history of boxing. This guy had a record of 110-1. This guy was part of one of the best Olympic boxing teams of all time. I would say the 1976 was the best, but 84, in my opinion, was the second best. He won a gold medal. He was a 2-time welterweight champion of the world. And this guy knew more about boxing than JD's ever could. He forgot more about boxing than JD's could ever know. Okay? And he threw this man under the bus. Even after this is the guy that was saying to this day, to this day, to this day. He's a hypocrite. He's a hypocrite to this day. He's a hypocrite because now he's part of it now. He's part of the problem now because he's doing everything he said that shouldn't be done. Never heard the zero evidence angle in comparison to Breland. I never looked at it this way. Good analogy. Well, it is a good. It's facts. It's facts. The white man actually had evidence against him because he was there. So if wrongdoing was done, he was there to catch it. And he's giving this guy a pass. You know what he says? Oh, well, I gave JD's a talking to. I had a conversation with him about it. I wasn't happy about what JD's did. Yeah. But you fired Breland, but you kept JD's. You fucking frauds. All of you frauds. To this day, to this day, to this day. And then to this day, you did the thing to Breland that you complained about that was being done to you and other black people in America. You made Breland the victim here. And he did nothing. There's zero evidence. Where's the water bottle? Show me one piece of evidence where Breland ever had that water bottle in his fucking hand that night. And if you show it to me, then I'll apologize. Anyone show me any clips or anything that showed Mark Breland with a water bottle in his hand the night of that fight. But yet he spiked the water. This reminds me back in the days. A white woman comes out and says, oh, this guy raped me. Well, where's the evidence? Oh, you're just guilty because you're black. So is Mark Breland guilty because he was the black man? You threw the black man under the bus. And this was an honorable man. This was not just a black man. This was an honorable man in general. This guy was an honorable, legendary man. I'm not even going to say he was an honorable black man or a legendary black man. He was an honorable man. This was an honorable man. Okay? He was an honorable man. And you dishonored him. You dishonored him. And none of you motherfuckers are saying anything about that. Anything about that, you LDPC guys. You LDBC guys are saying shit about that. Well, I'm gonna do it for you. I'm gonna do the right thing for you. I'm gonna pull back the curtain and expose the hypocrisy, the bullshit. I'm gonna do it for you. You fucking disgraces, all of us. All of you are a disgrace for not speaking on behalf of Mark Breland. So I'm gonna do it for you. I'm gonna do it for you, you fucking frauds. This was an honorable man. He was an honorable man. He's the last person on that team that should have been dishonored, but yet he was. Why? Why was it done? Why was it done? Just so they could put forth this bullshit narrative. So I'm going to listen. I'm going to throw the black men under the bus, but I'm going to put guys like JD as Shelly Finkel. I'm going to give them the preferential treatment. They did nothing wrong. Shelly Finkel's sitting there canceling. He's supposed to be a manager and supposed to have Wilder's best interests at heart. Shelly Finkel is. But yet, he's canceling meetings with the other side, AJ. Eddie Hearn's trying to make the fight between AJ and Wilder, scheduling meetings. And you got a manager who won't even go to the meetings. He won't even go to the meetings. He won't even sit down and talk, which is his job to do so. He's there to negotiate fights. And as much as I respect Shelly Finkel because he was the manager for Mike Tyson, for Vladimir Klitschko, for Mark Breland himself, for Meldrick Taylor, for Pernell Whitaker, for all of these guys. Evander Holyfield. He was the manager for all these great fighters and did a great job for all those fighters. But all of a sudden he gets with Wilder and everything falls apart. So do I blame him 100%? No, because at the end of the day, what these fighters love to do is they love to put the network out in front of them. They love to put the manager out in front of them. They love to put the promoter out in front of them. It's not me. It's these guys who aren't allowing this fight to happen. It's them. So they give themselves cover. But at the end of the day, the fighter is the boss. The fighter is the boss. So Shelly Finkel had to be put out there. He was the scapegoat. Lou DiBella was the scapegoat. Because at the end of the day, Lou DiBella spoke out and said, you know what? I think Wilder should have signed that DAZN deal. He should have accepted that offer. And what happened? Just because he voiced his opinion, just because he had a difference of opinion with the rest of the team, he was no longer Deontay Wilder's promoter. He got removed. So this just goes to tell you, it's not everybody else. It's Wilder. Wilder never wanted that fight ever. Never wanted that fight ever. Never. And it's clear as day now. There's no more evidence could be put forth to show that that's the case. No more evidence could be put forth to show that that was the case. And I apologize to AJ. I apologize to Eddie Hearn. And I'm even going to apologize to the AJ fans who I think I still think are somewhat crazy, but I'm still going to apologize to the AJ fans. And why am I going to do that? Because I was wrong. I am a man who gave Deontay Wilder the benefit of the doubt. And I was blaming Hearn and I was blaming AJ. No more. No more. I am admitting I was wrong. Wilder never wanted that fucking fight. It's not a coincidence that Fury and AJ both said, I want to unify the titles. And it's not a coincidence that that fight's going to happen this year. and Wilder versus AJ could never be made. I mean, we can't ignore that. Can't ignore that. Like Fury and AJ are going to fight. They're going to fight. Bob Arum is basically saying the deal is done. Eddie Hearn is basically saying the deal is done. All they need is a venue. Probably going to end up fighting in Saudi. And Wilder's going to be on the outside looking in, just like he was on the outside looking in, just like when he went over and he did the commentary for the Joshua versus Klitschko fight, and he was like, "Oh, this is great. I wish I could be a part of something like this," and he wasn't, right? And then just like when when Fury was fighting, when Fury fought Klitschko, and he had to look at that. Oh, that was a great fight. Blah 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 blah. But he's always on the outside looking in right now. And why is that? Because it's his own fault. Because these guys are willing to put their legacy on the line. They're willing to take the chances, and he wasn't. And, credit to Deontay Wilder. Credit to Deontay Wilder. He made a shit ton of money with these Fury fights. He was on the Forbes list for last year. That's great. That's great. But these guys are going to pass you. Not only in earnings, but in reputation, but in stature. Unfortunately, you're going to be remembered more for your excuses instead of your accomplishments. People are going to forget about Fury with the drug test failure. They're going to forget about those things. People are going to forget about Joshua getting knocked out by Ruiz. If these guys fight, which they will fight in May or June, and they put on a great fight, a fight that the fans can really look back on and say this was a great fight, then all their previous sins will be forgiven. And until you fight one of these guys and you get a win over one of these guys, your sins will never be forgiven. Your reputation will never be repaired. You're always going to be the guy on the outside looking in, regardless of what your sycophants say, regardless of what your minions say, regardless of what all those crazy fans of yours say, you'll always be on the outside looking in. So that's the truth of the matter. And it's going to be hard to disagree with that. It's going to be hard to deny that. It really is. It's going to be hard to deny that. So at the end of the day, I'm going to end it on this. I think I've made my point pretty clear. We have to look at the history. We have to look at the history. Okay? You have to look at the history. You got guys like Canelo. You got guys like Joshua. You got guys like Fury. You got guys like Teofimo Lopez. These guys are putting their money where their mouth is. Okay? These guys are putting their money where their mouth is. Billy Joe Saunders is getting ready to fight Canelo in May. Canelo stepping up, fighting these tougher fights. You got all these guys putting their money where their mouth is. Okay? Got all these guys putting their money where their mouth is. Terrence Crawford's reaching out. Bob Arum is reaching out to Al Heyman, talking about making a Spence fight on behalf of Crawford. He's trying to make the fight happen. Crawford's saying he wants to fight. Spence doesn't want it. Spence is saying he doesn't need it. Crawford wants to fight. Crawford wants the Porter fight. So you got Porter saying no. You got Spence saying no. Caleb Plant turned the Canelo fight down. Charlo turned the Canelo fight down. Right? Charlo turned the Canelo fight down. Wilder continuously turned the Joshua fight down. It admitted he had more money on the table to fight Joshua than he had to fight Fury, but he turned it down. Turned down the stylistically easier fight on paper, in my mind, because he knew that Joshua could punch, and that was a concern. That was a concern, in my opinion. So we cannot ignore this pattern of and same thing with Gary Russell. Same thing with Gary Russell. Same thing with Tank Davis. Tank Davis never fought Lomachenko. Why? Never fought Lomachenko. Why? There's a pattern. All the PBC guys are taking the easier fights, and they're not taking the tough fights. They're not taking the fights because all these tough fights that are across the street, and even when Keith Thurman was champion, he wouldn't fight Errol Spence. There's a pattern. And I'm not insulting them. I'm not saying I'm not insulting these guys. All I want to say is it's them and them alone. They are the primary reason why these fights with other guys are not getting made. We got to stop giving them a pass. We got to stop saying, oh, well, it's the promoter's fault. It's the manager's fault. They don't want the fights because Bob Arum is talking to Al Heyman. They're having a dialogue. They're trying to get these fights made. But Bob Arum said Errol Spence is the one that isn't signing the contract. He's not the one that is willing to accept the fight. Just like Caleb Plant didn't want the Canelo fight. Just like Sean Porter doesn't want the Terence Crawford fight. Just like Jamar Charlo doesn't want the Golovkin fight or the Canelo fight. There is a pattern here. It cannot be ignored. And I tried to ignore it for years, but I won't do it any longer. And I hope that you guys choose to not do the same either. Do not do the same either. All right, guys, that's all I got, man. That's all I got. I hope that more people will be as objective as me and try to look past your bias. I know we're in a world now where everybody wants to be on a team. Everybody wants to take a side, but don't box yourself in. Don't put yourself in a situation where you're going to ride with somebody regardless if they're wrong or right. You could still ride with somebody, but you could still call them out when they're wrong. Said it before and I'll say it again, and I sound like a broken horse. I love Fury to death. Fury right now is by far my favorite fighter in the sport of boxing. By far. Love the guy. But again, if he comes out and says something crazy like I failed my drug test because I ate boar meat, I can't co-sign that. I can't co-sign that. When he goes away from the sport for almost 3 years, 2.5 years, and comes back and thinks that he should still be the champion, I can't co-sign that. Doesn't mean I don't love the guy. Doesn't mean I don't think he's the best in the world. Doesn't mean any of that. But I got to call BS when I see it. I got to tell the truth. I got to tell the truth. I got to do it. I can't go against my own common sense logic just so I could be part of a team. I'd rather be an island unto myself. I'd rather stand alone. Okay? Than stand for nothing. I'd rather stand alone and stand up for what's right as opposed to standing for nothing. I'm 51 years old now. I've lived more years than I got left. And I hope that this next second half of my life that I could live with honor, not have to look back and regret anything. Not look back and say I shouldn't have did that or I shouldn't have said that or, why did I think that or why am I thinking this? I'm looking at life now from a different lens. Okay? I know how the world works. I know that we have to deal with politics. I know we deal with a lot of bullshit and BS. But again, I have to understand and really be able to see what the truth is. And the truth of the matter is Wilder never wanted that fight with Joshua. It's pretty close to being a fact than could ever be proven. It's just hard to not say that he wanted that he ever wanted that fight. He never wanted that fight. Never. So you guys really need to take a second look, at all these PBC fighters, and you have to ask yourself, why is it always them complaining? Why is it always them being the side that doesn't want the fights? Why is it always them who have potential big fights on the table and they never get made? Why is it always that? Why is it always them in that situation? Why? You have to ask yourself that. All right, guys. That's all I got, man. Thank you for tuning in. Beeb is out. Talk to y'all soon. Have a great day. And yeah. Let's just enjoy what we have in front of us, man. We got Fury versus Joshua coming up. Let's look forward to that, man, because that right now is the fight that everybody wants, and we're gonna get it. All right, thank you, guys. Thank you, Raphael. Thank you, Suleiman. Thank you, Scant Rants. Thank you, everybody. Beaver's out. Talk to y'all soon. Peace out. Have a great day.